So this is the beginning of the Canterbury Tales. We will be starting with the general prologue. So take your packet, and it's photocopied for a reason. Photocopied so that you can annotate, write notes, highlight, circle words that maybe you don't know to define later as we go. What's going to happen is I'm going to read, I'm going to expand on some ideas. I want you to take notes as well as fill in your character chart when we actually get to the descriptions of the pilgrims. Okay? So what we're going to begin with is on page 15 of the general prologue, and this is part 1 of the prologue, which is the invocation of spring, or the telling of the time of the season. Okay? When April with his sweet showers has pierced the dryness of March to the root, and bathed every vein in such moisture as has power to bring forth the flower. When also Zephyrus, with his sweet breath, has breathed spirit into the tender new shoots in every wood and meadow, and the young sun has run half his course in the sign of the ram, and small birds sing melodies and sleep with their eyes open all the night, so nature pricks them in their hearts. Then people long to go on pilgrimages, and palmers long to seek strange shores and far-off shrines known in various lands. And especially, from the ends of every shire in England, they come to Canterbury, to seek the holy blissful martyr, who helped them when they were sick. So the first really long sentence of the general prologue talks about springtime, and that people go on pilgrimages during the spring. And they do that for a couple of reasons. Spring is, as a symbol, is seen as the time of rebirth or renewal. Think about how trees bloom and grass shoots up. Babies are born to animals. All of that happens in the springtime. So rebirth is essentially what these people want when they go on a pilgrimage. It also, for practical reasons, was the time that the weather was getting warmer, that most of the work was done, and it was a time when, winter being over, it was a good time to kind of get out and enjoy each other and the land. They talk about how they're going to Canterbury from London. You saw in the PowerPoint last time that Chaucer references the Holy Blissful Martyr. Remember, the Holy Blissful Martyr is Thomas Becket. At this time, people desire to go to many kind of devout English pilgrims set off on pilgrimages to visit shrines, as they believe that it's part of their duty, and also because it provides a little bit of entertainment for them. It befell that one day in that season, as I was in Southwark at the Tabard Inn, ready to go on my pilgrimage to Canterbury, with a most devout heart, at night there came into that hostelry a company of 29 people, all sorts of people, who had met by chance, and all of them were pilgrims who were riding toward Canterbury. So Chaucer's talking to you, the reader, just as if he's telling a story. He says I. He is the narrator. He is talking to you, the audience. And he says, this is my experience. I was going on a pilgrimage to Canterbury. I went to the Tabard Inn in Southwark, London, and I met these 29 people. They were strange people from all different places, and it happened to be fate that intervened, and that's why we met. The chambers and the stables were spacious, and we were made most comfortable. And shortly, when the sun had gone down, I had spoken with every one of them, so that I had soon become one of their group, and made an arrangement to rise early to be on our way, as I shall tell you. So he meets these people in the Tabard Inn. It's called a hostelry, or a hostel, as you may be familiar with. It's a place of food and drink and also lodging. So he stayed overnight there, met this group of people, talked to them all night, and then they asked him to join them in their pilgrimage. But nonetheless, while I have the time and space before I pass on further in this tale, it seems to me in order to tell you about each of them as they seem to me, and who they were, and of what rank in life, and also what they wore. And with a night then I will begin. So he tells us that I'm going to tell you about each one of these people that I meet before they begin to tell their tales. But I'm telling you about them as they seem to me. So this is just my opinion. This is the influence or the experience I had with these people. So there's this shift now from going first person into plural because he now becomes part of the group. Remember, he happily agrees to join them, so he wants to be a part of this group. But he's writing the story after he takes the pilgrimage. So his descriptions of the pilgrims, although he's telling us this is the first time he was meeting them, are based upon his whole journey with them. Remember, this is his opinion. So opinions are based on experiences. So he begins with the knight. So on your character chart, you should take out or begin with the knight. Remember, you're going to talk about the rank, where they are in their station of life, their role, what their position was, what their title was, and then a description of their physical appearance. Okay? And sometimes he throws in a little bit of their emotional, mental appearance as well. The column on the end, the third column, is what you believe or how you believe this person is corrupt or pure. And you can always do that at the end. There was a knight, a valiant man, who from the time when he had first begun to venture out had lovely chivalry, truth and honor, liberality and courtesy. He had proved his worth in his lord's wars, in which he had ridden as far as any man, both in Christendom and the heathen lands, and he had always been honored for his valor. So some of the notes about the knight is that there's the initial description is that he is valiant, he is loved, he is chivalrous, he is truthful and honors and courteous, all of the things that we want a knight to be. He was at Alexandria when it was won. Many times he had sat at the head of the table in Prussia, above knights of all nations. He had campaigned in Lithuania and in Russia more often than any other Christian man of his rank. He had also been in Granada at the siege of Alcestis, and also fought in Ben Marin. He had been at Laius and at Attalia when they were won, and he had sailed upon the Mediterranean with a noble host. He had been in 15 mortal battles, and fought for our faith at Talmechin 3 times in tournaments, and always slain his foe. This same worthy knight had also been at one time with the Lord of Balat, against another heathen in Turkey, and always he had won the highest honor. Although he was a valiant, he was prudent, and bore himself as meekly as a maiden. Never in all his life had he been rude to anyone at all. He was a true, perfect, gentle knight. But to tell you about his array, his horses were good, but he was not gaily dressed. He wore a fusion tunic, much stained by his hauberk, for he had just come back from his expedition and was on his way to make his pilgrimage. So we learn of his history. He's fought in the Crusades, he's won most all of his battles, he's done things that no other person has done, no other knight has done. So he's seen as extremely loyal, extremely worthy, and the epitome of what society wants a knight to be. But he's very polite, he's very mild, he's soft-spoken, he's not showy, he doesn't have a bunch of armor on. His horses are well taken care of, but he doesn't physically really take care of himself. He actually wears a blood-stained tunic that goes under his coat of mail. The quality of the wool is very poor, so he would rather spend his money on his horses and making sure they were healthy as opposed to himself, which is a good quality to have. With him was his son, a young squire, a lover and a gay youth on his way to knighthood, with locks as curly as if they had been pressed. He was about 20 years old, I guess. He was of normal height and wonderfully agile and of great strength. He had been on cavalry expeditions for a while, in Flanders, in Artois, and in Picardy. And in his short time he had bore himself well, in the hope of winning his lady's favor. His clothing was embroidered so as to look like a meadow full of fresh flowers, white and red. He sang or fluted all the day long. He was as youthful as the month of May. His gown was short, with long, wide sleeves. He knew how to sit his horse well and ride beautifully. He could compose songs and poems, joust and dance too, and draw and write. So hotly did he love that at night he slept no more than a nightingale. He was courteous, humble, and serviceable, and carved for his father at the table. So the squire is the son of the knight. obviously of high ranking because he is nobility as well. He is apprentice. He is always courteous, humble, and serviceable. He actually physically cuts up the food for his father at the dinner table. He loves his father and he treats him very well. He is, though, a lover of women, so much so that he gets very little sleep every night. He's a happy young man. He's about 20 years old, and his goal is to be a knight one day. He is aesthetically very beautiful and attractive. He has curly hair. He's of normal height. They talk about how he's strong and lively. He's fought in battles and performed well, but only because he's really hoping to impress the ladies. He's not morally driven like his father is. His clothing, unlike his father, is beautifully worked. It's embroidered. It has red and white flowers. His gown is short with long, beautiful sleeves. So he's very focused on his appearance. He's also a exemplary symbol of courtly love. He sings, he plays the flute, he writes poetry, he draws, he dances, he jousts. His whole life is really devoted to things that are beautiful, including women. A yeoman is a knight's freeborn servant, was also with the knight, and no other servants at the time, so it pleased him to ride. The yeoman was dressed in a coat and a hood of green. Beneath his belt, he carefully carried a sheath of bright, keen, peacock-feathered arrows. Well did he know how to take care of his equipment. His arrows never drooped with tired feathers. And in his hand he carried a mighty bow. He was a brown-faced man with a close-cropped head. He knew all there is to know about woodcraft. On his arm was a fine wrist guard, and by one side a sword and shield, on the other a bright dagger, well mounted and sharp as the point of a spear. A silver St. Christopher medal shone on his breast. He carried a horn with a green baldric. I suppose that he must have been a forester. So he's in the class between the laborers and the gentry. He's a guard, but he's a landowner. Physically, his coat is coat and hood are green. He carries a bow and arrows that he's made. They're also beautifully maintained. He takes pride in his appearance as well as his weapons. He has a wrist guard and sword and shield, horn, belt worn kind of to hold the weapon. They call him a brown-faced man with shorn hair, so close, short hair. He is a master woodsmith and forester. And then they talk about the medal of St. Christopher, who is the patron saint of safe travel. Obviously, the forester is on the move often, so the fact that he prays to St. Christopher says a couple of things about him. He's religious and devout, but also that his movements are such that he needs to pray for himself. There was also a nun, a prioress, whose smile was modest and sweet. Her greatest oath was only, "By St. Loy." She was called Madame Eglantine. She sang the divine service well, intuning it in her nose in a most seemingly way. She spoke French well and properly, after the school of Stratford at Bow, for the French of Paris was unknown to her. Her table manners were admirable. She never let a morsel fall from her lips, nor wet her fingers too deeply in the sauce. Daintily she carried a morsel to her lips, taking care that no drop should fall in her breast. She took much pleasure in proper etiquette. She wiped her upper lip so carefully that no trace of grease could be seen in her cup when she had taken a drink from it. She helped herself to food in a very proper way. And certainly she was very cheerful, most pleasant and amiable in bearing, and took great pains to behave in a well-bred fashion, to be stately in manner, and to appear worthy of reverence. But to speak of her tender feelings, she was so charitable and so full of pity that she would weep if she saw a mouse caught in a trap and dead or bleeding. She had a few small dogs that she fed with roast meat, or milk and fine bread, but she wept indeed if one of them died, or if someone hit it smartly with a stick. She was all feeling and tender heart. Her wimple was suitably pleated, her nose well-shaped, her eyes bright as glass, her mouth very small and soft and red, and indeed she had a fine forehead. It was almost a handspan broad, I believe, for certainly she was not undersized. I noticed that her cloak was becoming. Around her arm she wore a rosary of tiny coral beads marked off with green, and on it hung a lovely golden brooch on which was written first a crowned A, and then Amor Vincit Omnia.